Hello, my name is Alfredo Coppola. I'm the co-founder of an organization based in San Francisco called the U.S. Market Access Center. I'm actually a native of Canada. I'm a Canadian citizen, and I was raised by Italian immigrants. I was very passionate about entrepreneurship at quite a young age, and I had 3 different companies in Canada. One of them was quite successful in the gaming and technology industry, when that's what drew me to Silicon Valley. So I've been living in Silicon Valley for about 20 years, and I started this organization with a co-founder to help international startups to become successful in Silicon Valley. It's one of the most rewarding career moves I have made because we get to help young entrepreneurs from so many different countries, including Italy. We actually have helped more than 400 startups from Italy to enter the US market. And about 3 years ago, we started another organization called Prospera Women, and this was a spin-off of our main organization. Myself and my co-founder were both men in our 60s, and we asked ourselves, how can we help the world a little bit more? Let's do something different to help entrepreneurs in a different way. And when we discovered the very unbalanced gender gap when it comes to women entrepreneurs trying to go global and do business on a global scale, we saw that the numbers were very terrible. Specifically, the amount of money that women raise from investors. You probably have heard these numbers, but actually less than 2% of women receive funding from investors. The number that really shocked us was 500 billion, for example, was invested by US investors in 2022, and women got even less than 2%. So for this reason, we started Prospera Women. It's a division of our organization, and so far we have run 8 different programs around the world. We have helped 67 women from 11 different countries. And while we're proud of that success, we've helped to raise about $31 million for about a third of those entrepreneurs. It's not enough. We needed to do more. So this year, we were very proud. We have established what we call communities in 14 different cities around the world, including 3 in Italy. We have one in Rome, one in Milano, and one in Sardinia. I'm very happy about those numbers. We are currently on the path to raise about $20 million that we can use this fund to help invest in women entrepreneurs. And we're also raising money with a not-for-profit foundation where we help to issue grants to women entrepreneurs. One of the most exciting parts of our work is to identify those really talented entrepreneurs from countries that don't have a lot of opportunity. So what do I mean by that? You know, it's good to work with many Western countries. For example, throughout Western Europe, they're quite established. But we also do a lot of work in other countries such as Africa, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, where people really have been born and raised in an environment of scarcity. But we know that talent is absolutely universal, but opportunity is not. And even in some rich countries such as Korea and Japan, where the technology is actually very advanced and their economies are very strong, they have several cultural barriers. A lot of them don't speak English as well, the international language of business. So we help even entrepreneurs that struggle with English to help them navigate the complicated corporate culture that they find in the United States. I myself, even though I'm living in the United States, I'm not American, and being raised in Canada with Italian immigrants, I really grew up more of a European mindset. And people always ask us, you know, what is the biggest challenge that companies from my country, could be any country, faces when they try to enter the US market? And the answer is always the same. It's not about technology. It's not about money. It's 100% about corporate culture. It's really remarkable how the United States, as a very powerful nation economically, but it's very competitive. And it's very difficult for most startups, most technology companies to enter this competitive market. So we help them with a lot of those, sales and marketing training, even corporate culture. We teach cross-cultural communication. It is remarkable. And I also wanted to point out that what many people don't know, that even though Silicon Valley is part of California, and California is part of the United States, Silicon Valley is actually not really the United States. And on paper, of course they are. But culturally, it is a very unique part of the world. I can share with you some numbers. We have helped right now more than 2,600 startups from over 42 countries. And by collecting the data from their activity and their entrepreneurial journey, we can draw some interesting conclusions. And also we have some facts that are interesting as well. So among the 2,600, about 32% have been successful in getting customers. And, we think this is a pretty good number because getting a first customer outside of your native country is very difficult. But many of these success stories, it takes them more than a year to get a first customer. But the other number we're quite proud of is that 18% of the 2,600 companies have been successful in raising capital from investors. That number is over $5 billion. And then finally, we've had 42 companies that have been acquired by US companies at a value of $4.2 billion altogether. So we look at that data and we are very interested to analyze it further, that only 2/3 of those successful companies have actually set up an office in the United States. And that was really puzzling because you would think, wow, if you're successful in raising capital and getting customers, shouldn't you have an office in the United States? Technically, yeah, you would say yes. Just about all of the graduates of our programs, what they really gain from their experience in Silicon Valley is adopting what we call a global growth mindset. And it really is so unique because even though there are other really big successful cities in America like New York and Boston and Chicago and other cities in Texas, it is really different culturally. And you really don't adopt the same global mindset. What many people don't know is that more than 60% of the CEOs in Silicon Valley are not born in the United States. And that tells you that it's a very international friendly environment. Even though there is so much money in these other cities in the United States, when it comes to Silicon Valley, it is really a unique place when it comes to finding investors that invest in growth startups. Many startups from Europe, for example, when they start to want to expand their business outside of their native country, they usually come to New York, right? Because New York is a closer flight. They also probably learned English by watching movies like The Wolf of Wall Street, other movies that talk about the wealth in New York. And there's no question, New York has a lot of money, but most of that money is private equity funds, real estate funds. It's a different kind of capital. It is not really what we call startup-friendly capital. Silicon Valley actually has the highest percentage of what we call risk capital investors. These are investors that are very comfortable with investing in companies they may not even understand what their business model might be. And this is an incredibly intelligent process. But the mindset of investors in Silicon Valley are very different than other parts of the United States. So that's one important point. And while there are very big banks and a lot of funds in places like New York, more than 2/3 of all of New York's money when it comes to investing in a startup flows through Silicon Valley. Let's look at 2022, which was the record year. More funding was given to startups than any other year in history. And that was a COVID year. So $305 billion was invested by investors during this year. And more than 1/3 of that money was funded in Silicon Valley. Imagine, Silicon Valley is only 6.5 million people out of a country that is 330 million people. That is remarkable. So Silicon Valley is a very important place to visit. It is an important place to gain what we call this global mindset. And this is something that cannot be compared to what you get when you go to other places in the United States. So that's a very interesting point. And again, this is not because I'm so smart. It's because the feedback that we've received from more than 2,600 startups that have worked with us. There's another really exciting point that I'd like to make. Many people think that Silicon Valley actually represents the United States. And I mentioned earlier that while it is in the United States, of course, the region is a global gateway. Let me explain why. Not many people know this, but there are more than 400 multinational corporations that have set up an innovation office in Silicon Valley. And an innovation office is very different than a corporate office. For example, you may have heard of Microsoft, you may have heard of Amazon. Of course, they have corporate offices all over Italy. They have corporate offices in Japan and in Germany, right? But a corporate office is not an innovation office. And the innovation office, which is in Silicon Valley, focuses on one thing. They invest in new innovations that are coming from the startup community. So identifying an innovation officer, the decision maker, is very easy. For example, if you are from Italy and you want to do business with Sony, based in Japan, you don't need to travel to Tokyo. In fact, finding an innovation officer in the Tokyo office of Sony Corporation, you may never succeed. Rather, in Sony of America in the San Jose, California, which is part of Silicon Valley, it is staffed by 16 people who have an innovation officer title. Back in 2014, 2015, we saw a surge of big multinational corporations setting up their innovation offices. If you recall, during the telecom sector, and of course in Italy you have Telecom Italia, you have other telcos that are here, they all set up innovation offices in Silicon Valley, and that is different than a corporate office. In 2 weeks, you can meet with the world's top telcos. You've got Singtel from Singapore, Deutsche Telekom from Germany. You've got Telecom Italia, you've got Telefonica from Spain. You have British Telecom from the UK, China Mobile from China, and the list goes on. And that is something you cannot do in New York. That is not something you can do in Chicago. That is actually not something you can do anywhere else in the world. So for this reason, it is a global gateway. About a third of the graduates of our accelerator program have actually received multinational customers without having to travel to these other countries. So in closing, I'd like to really conclude, for those of you who are considering entrepreneurship as a career, to look at Silicon Valley as an important strategic place to learn, and it's the best place to grow a company. Good luck to you all.